The curse of silent Christmas night. Deep within Vermont's snow-covered forests lay a small, secluded town called Willowbrook. The town looked like a painting, especially during Christmas. Every house glowed with warm lights, and the scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air. But for many years, Willowbrook had a mysterious tradition that the locals refused to discuss with outsiders: the silent Christmas Eve vigil. Every Christmas Eve at exactly 10 o'clock, the townsfolk would gather in the church square, holding candles and murmuring prayers. The streets would become eerily silent, and no one dared to sing or laugh. At midnight, the vigil would end, and everyone would return to their homes, locking their doors tightly until sunrise. The origin of this strange ritual was steeped in whispers and fear, and no one dared to explain it. Emily Ward, a travel journalist from New York, arrived in Willowbrook on Christmas Eve. She was captivated by the town's old-world charm and its strange air of mystery. During her stay at the town's only inn, she noticed the residents growing tense as evening approached. Curious, she asked the innkeeper, an elderly man named Mr. Grayson, "Why does everyone seem so frightened?" He avoided her gaze as he replied, "It's best not to ask too many questions, miss. Stay in your room tonight, and no matter what you hear, don't look out the window." Emily's curiosity was too strong to heed the warning. She feigned agreement, but decided to break the rules. That night at the stroke of 10, she left the inn and followed the townsfolk to the church square. They stood silently, their faces pale and filled with unease. When the church bells chimed at midnight, Emily heard something strange, a faint melody carried by the icy wind. It sounded like a child singing Silent Night, but the voice was distorted, as if coming from underwater. The townsfolk froze in place, their candle flames flickering. A woman standing beside Emily whispered urgently, "You shouldn't be here. Leave." Before Emily could respond, the woman was pulled away by the others, leaving her alone at the edge of the square. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily followed the sound. It led her to the edge of the forest, where the snow sparkled under the moonlight. As she ventured deeper, she saw something strange. An old wooden sled, partially buried in the snow. It was decorated with broken Christmas ornaments and tattered ribbons. Next to the sled stood a man dressed as Santa Claus, but his appearance was terrifying. His suit was filthy and torn, and his face was hidden behind a cracked porcelain mask. He held a lantern glowing with a pale green light. "Lost your way?" he asked in a strange voice that echoed unnaturally. Emily's fear was overwhelming, but she forced herself to speak. "Who are you? What's happening here?" The man tilted his head as if amused. "Ah, another curious soul. You heard the song, didn't you? The song that lures the wanderers." Before she could move, she felt icy hands gripping her arms. She turned to see children, at least a dozen, emerging from the shadows. Their eyes were hollow, and their faces were pale, as though life had long since left them. "These are Willowbrook's children," the man explained. "They were once my helpers, naughty children who didn't listen to their parents' warnings. Now, they help me spread joy in my own way." Emily realized the town's secret. This creature, this thing, was the reason behind the silent vigil. Every Christmas Eve it roamed the town, luring anyone foolish enough to wander alone. "You'll be one of them soon," he said, extending a gloved hand that seemed unnaturally long. Terrified, Emily took a picture with the camera she was carrying. The flash startled the children momentarily, and the creature recoiled slightly. She seized the chance and ran back toward the town, her breath visible in the freezing air. The distorted song grew louder as it chased her through the trees. When she finally reached the church square, the townsfolk had disappeared, and the bells had stopped ringing. She banged on the inn's door until Mr. Grayson let her in. "You shouldn't have gone out," he said gravely. "You've caught his attention now." Emily spent the rest of the night trembling in her room. Outside, she heard faint knocks on her window and the sound of children laughing. But she followed Mr. Grayson's advice and didn't look outside. By dawn, the strange noises stopped. She packed her bags and left Willowbrook as quickly as possible. But as she drove away, she noticed something odd on the seat beside her. A photograph she hadn't taken this time. It showed her standing in just a distant echo, surrounded by the hollow-eyed years had passed, with the masked felt the melody drawing closer with each Christmas. Emily never wrote about Willowbrook. At first, she thought she was every Christmas Eve. She hears the fifth melody of Silent Night echoing in the air. The sounds became clearer and more urgent. On the next Christmas Eve, as she sat in her small apartment in New York, she began to hear faint knocks on her door. It was midnight sharp. She tried to ignore the sound, but the knocking grew louder and more forceful. Then, she heard the voice of a small child saying, "Emily, open the door. I want to show you a Christmas gift." She grabbed her phone and called the police, but the call didn't go through. All the electronics in her apartment suddenly stopped working, and even the lights dimmed. Suddenly, her window glowed with a pale green light, the same light she had seen from the masked man's lantern in the woods. She tried to pretend she wasn't there, but the air in the room became unbearably cold. Then she heard a distorted voice, as if speaking from another realm, saying, "You were brave, Emily, but bravery comes at a price. No one escapes me forever." Slowly, she turned toward the window and saw her reflection in the glass. But it wasn't her face. The reflection showed her with black, hollow eyes and an unnatural grin stretching across her face. At that moment, she froze in place. The silence that followed was terrifying. The sound suddenly disappeared, and the devices came back to life as if nothing had happened. But the room was no longer the same. On the table in front of her was a new photograph, a picture of Emily standing in the woods, surrounded by the children, their hands gripping her tightly, while the masked man stood behind her with a wide grin beneath his cracked mask. From that night on, Emily vanished without a trace. No one ever found her or uncovered the truth. But in her abandoned apartment, every Christmas Eve, faint sounds of children singing Silent Night can be heard, accompanied by quiet laughter and knocking at the doors. The town, despite its eerie history, remained silent. It's said that anyone who ventures near Willowbrook on Christmas sees the shadows of children among the trees, smiling coldly and humming the same distorted song, as if inviting new victims to join them. The end.